Today, just a quick and serious video on tape wobble and Flutter. Just before I get started, I wanted to make a quick plug for a merch store that I've created. There's a link in the description below. It's just a small little store that's running on Etsy right now. You can get the cassette tape that I just showed earlier. You can get that on a t-shirt from that store. If there's any demand for any other types of shirts, I can get it on hoodies, or I can probably get it on a hat. Any proceeds from that obviously go to supporting the channel with equipment, with microphones. Actually, probably not a microphone. I just ordered a new microphone. We'll see how that works out. I'm also hoping to probably include some of that merch in giveaways and things. I'm also looking for any ideas. If you have any, just let me know. Now we'll cut over to Ableton, and I'll show you a preset that I have that's using stock plugins for WoW and Flutter. You can add this to your own master tracks. You can add it to your own samples if you want. I tend to use it on master tracks more often. If you put too much WoW and Flutter on samples, then they can become out of tune with each other and they can cause weird stereo phasing effects. It might be something you're looking for. I tend to use it more as a subtle effect just on the master itself, so it sounds like the whole track is being played through an old tape set. Obviously, the best way to handle this kind of stuff is probably to use a real tape deck instead of plugins, but we can get a relatively nice sounding setup pretty quickly with plugins. I've also added a macro control to use Ableton's built-in vinyl distortion to add just a little bit of tape saturation. You should probably use it pretty sparingly. Make sure you don't use the scratches or the dust settings in that vinyl plugin. They're not very good. Let's check it out in Ableton right now. So you can see here, we're using Ableton's built-in delay and we're setting it to repitch mode. And then what we're doing is we're modulating the rate and the time of each of those plugins. For Flutter, we have a significantly higher rate, and for WoW, we have a longer rate. This is actually a fairly accurate simulation of how old tape decks work. The tape machine rotates the tape and plays it across the playhead, and it attempts to do it at a constant rate. Because the mechanism that's playing the tape across the head is using small electronic motors, they tend to have minor fluctuations in the playback speed. What that does is it stretches and contracts the tape as it's playing across the head, which causes slight variations in pitch across the entire playback. Ableton's delay plugin, with modulation on the rate and time, can actually simulate this fairly accurately. I'm going to play back my demo track for you. First, I'm going to turn the effect off so you can hear how the track sounds without the effect, and then I'll play it again with the effect on. Here it is with the effect off. And here it is with the effect on. I'm using pretty subtle settings here, but you should have been able to hear the difference. There's the slight pitch variations, especially in the trumpet that's being used in the background. You can kind of hear it wavering up and down along with the vibrato of the trumpet. This really helps give it that kind of vintage feel, as well as the effect of playing your master back through a tape. This vintage and imperfect feel is a nice subtle subconscious effect that you can apply to your tracks that give it just a little bit of variation that is something that a listener can tell is lost if they're listening to an exact perfect track. It's really nice to have those slight variations, especially if you run it across something that's been looped a couple times. The longer you loop something, the more variations you need to have in it. I've included this preset along with the macro controls in the description of this video, so feel free to go and download that, use it on your own tracks, or try to replicate this in another DAW. I feel like most built-in delay plugins for any DAW should support a repitch mode and modulating the rate and time of the delay. Obviously, there are a lot of ways you can achieve this effect as well. This is the best way I've found in Ableton to do with stock plugins. Personally, I do tend to use RC20 Retro Color. The WoW and Flutter controls in that plugin are very similar to what I have here in this preset, but that plugin does add a lot of other stuff. Like you notice here, I'm using the vinyl distortion in Ableton to simulate a little bit of tape distortion. It works well for really low drive values, so I've kind of capped out the drive in the mapping here. But you can use it to give just a little bit of that upper end harmonic saturation. But some other plugins, if you have like a tape sim plugin, or you have, again, like I mentioned, RC20, there are more distortion models in there that can help add the kind of noise that you're looking for. To help illustrate this effect more cleanly, I've created one more example here. It's just a simple channel that has an 80s style saw stack. This is the kind of thing you'd hear in like 80s sci-fi movies that used a lot of analog hardware The analog hardware has the same kind of issue where it tries to give you a consistent playback pitch, but there's subtle variations over time that cause it to detune. So I'm going to play it back. I have the effect enabled right now, and I have not extreme, but pretty extreme settings. So I'll just play it back for you. So for that, you could really hear the pitch fluctuating and varying. If you want to take that 80s effect one step further, what you can do is you can press Ctrl G to create an audio effects rack. Then, if you go in here and you create another chain, so you have one chain and this is your wet chain, and you have another chain which is your dry chain. You can change the values. I kind of like having it on 50-50, and I'll show you what that sounds like. So what's happening here is we're running WoW and Flutter on one of the signal paths, but the other one is a straight through dry channel. When you mix those two together, you get this really cool chorus / phasing effect because one is slightly detuning and retuning itself against the other. This is very, very common effect that is used in a lot of even current sci-fi scoring, especially if it's somebody that's trying to do like a retro soundtrack to a sci-fi score. I know it's not really on genre for lo-fi hip hop, but you could actually take some of this 80s synth style stuff and you could apply some stuff that I'm going to show you in the next tutorial that can take something high def or something that doesn't sound sampled, add kind of a sampling effect to it, and you can get some really cool effects out of it. Thanks for hanging around to the end of this video. If you like this content, be sure to subscribe to the channel and like this video. Leave your comments below with any suggestions you have or any other questions you have. I'll try to get them answered in a future tutorial video or some other content.